maybe we shall try that again. I want Orion, who is going to be talking to us about global African presence.
Well, good morning.
The next segment of this conference. So I hope you have your notepads and pens or computers, ready to take. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you beautifully. Can you hear me as well? I'm right here.
We can hear you loud and clear.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. First, let me say it's an honor to be a part of the program. I've been a Pan-Africanist all my life. I'm probably the oldest participant. Daniel told me the other day that I resemble Moses. So we got a good laugh out of that. But it's wonderful to be talking about Pan-Africanism. It's wonderful to be around so many young people talking about Pan-Africanism. I've been doing this all of my adult life. I'm 65 years old. I'm an elder. And I've seen people come and go, but I'm still confident that the future belongs to African people. I think it's also an honor as an African American, a person whose ancestors were taken through the door of no return. And that was supposed to be the end of us. So I like to say that, or repeat the phrase of Kwame Nkrumah, that you're not an African because you're born in Africa. You are an African because Africa is born in you. Now, for me, I see history as my contribution to the struggle. It's something that I enjoy very much, I'm good at. And I think that that is my method of sharing or contributing to the overall struggle of our people. So rather than talk for a long time, what I want to do is a visual presentation. Let's see if it works. Also, this is the first time I've been in a video conference like this. This is new for me, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to go to start share screen, and let's see here. Now, can you see the images? Just give me a verbal yes or no, and I'll begin the slide presentation. Can you see it? Sister Angela?
No, we can't see anything just yet.
All right, let's see what else I can do.
If you could, was it share your screen and then click the screen that actually has the images, and hopefully, okay. Because I think I need to add it for you.
Oh. How about now? Yes? You can see the image now? Angela?
Yes. Yes.
All right,
one
beautiful.
moment.
Beautiful, beautiful. As long as you
coming
can see
now.
it, I'm happy. You can see.
It's just coming up. Hold on.
Yes. You see an image. It's actually a phone. You see what I'm talking about? Yes. All right. Let me just.
It's just loading up now.
All right.
I'll tell you when it's. I'll tell you live.
All right. Well, in the meantime, as you work on that aspect of it, let me just talk about why history is important. Yes.
Sorry, Professor. It's not actually showing just yet. It's just loading.
All right. Well, let me give a background to what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to spend some time today doing a presentation that I've done probably thousands of times over the years. I've lectured, I think, in 67 countries now. I've lectured on every continent except Antarctica. I've been able to visit, I think, 34 countries in Africa itself. I love Africa. And what I try to do, as I was pointing out, is to emphasize the importance of history, or what we call knowledge of self. Now, my philosophy is What you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you have been told. So as African people, we are told that we are second rate because we have no history, or that our history begins in a remote African jungle or slave plantation. And so therefore, many of us are turned off by history, and we lack the knowledge of self that we so desperately need. I think it's Marcus Garvey who said, or a colleague of mine, I'll put it another way, the more you love your history, the more you love yourself. And as African Americans, and I think Africans in general, I think that we need a big dose of self-love. So I want to integrate this presentation with some historical background and also show you images of Black people all over the world. That's what I intend to do. Can you see the image? Are we ready to take our journey?
It should just be loading now. I can see it, but I think it just takes time for the audience to see it.
My God.
So sorry for the delay. Right, there it is. I'm jumping up. It is now, your screen is now visible, Professor.
All right. Well, the first image is called the Ishango bone. This is a counting stick from Democratic Republic of Congo. It's estimated to be 25,000 years old. When I was growing up in Southern California in Los Angeles, mathematics was the most difficult class for me. I just didn't think Black people could excel in science and mathematics. And then later on, I found out that my ancestors were the very first mathematicians. And this is another powerful piece. This is an astronomical observatory. Speaking of Africans in science, this is an astronomical observatory at a place called Nata Playa. This is in northern Sudan. And then I want to spend a little time in Egypt. I think some people think, well, we spend too much time in Egypt as scholars. But the reason for that is because Egypt, in a sense, has been taken out of Africa. And as a result of that, we feel the need to reconnect it. Our greatest scholar from Senegal, Kanti Job, talked about how separating Egypt from the rest of Africa would be like taking Greece and Rome out of European civilization. This is one of the pharaohs, one of the kings. He comes to us from the third dynastic period in the Pyramid Age. His name is King Zoser, and he is important to us.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Professor Rashidi.
Yes.
Can I just ask you? Yeah, we can see the images, but I think you have to open one image so we can see the whole snapshot of all the images. So do you want to click into one and scroll through?
Yes, that's what I was attempting to do. I think the technology has gotten the better of me.
That's okay. Let's see if we can just bring one up and see if it will let you show one by one.
Can you see this one? I'm beginning to be a bit frustrated. I'm wondering perhaps if I should just give an overview. I would love for people to see the pictures. There's nothing like the images. And what I'm talking about is yes. I think that we were able to do it the other day when we did our test run, but for some reason, I don't seem to be able to focus on just the one image today, and that's a pity.
Do you want to try once more, just to open up one? It may just be time delay.
All right, I'm gonna go to screen share. And let's see if I can open up just one. How about that? Can you see that? Nope.
No, not yet. The screen's come off down for the moment.
All right. Well,
do you want to continue with your overview? Maybe we have to bring you back just to do through that, because I know they are powerful images, but just for your sake of your time.
Yes, they are. That's a pity. I didn't mean bother to draft an outline. I spent so much time preparing this magnificent presentation. But at any rate, let me just talk for a few minutes about the global African experience and Pan-Africanism. I think many people define Pan-Africanism as the unification of the African continent. But for me, it goes beyond that. I'm talking about not just the unification of Africa under leadership that is accountable to the masses of people, able to utilize the vast mineral resources of Africa first and foremost for African people, which will make Africa the strongest continent in the world, the strongest landmass in the world. There's no doubt about that. But in order to achieve that, I think that Africans outside of Africa have to be involved in that process. We need Africa and Africa needs us. And by that, I don't mean the sisters and brothers who have recently left Africa because of the exploitation of Africa and who are living in Europe or Canada or the United States. I'm talking in large measure about the descendants of African people who were taken away from Africa as a result of enslavement. And it's very important to say over and over and over again that slaves did not come from Africa. African people were captured in Africa and enslaved. I am not descended from slaves. I'm descended from African people, proud people who were captured in the motherland and taken away against their will. And I still see myself more African than I do American. But in addition to that, I think that what makes my work a little different than most other scholars, historians, professors, is that I'm not only talking about African people in the diaspora as a result of enslavement, but I'm talking about African people or the descendants of Africa, the children of Africa, if you will, who left Africa long before the transatlantic slave trade. And we have to say again and again and again that the history of African people does not begin with slavery and colonization. And the diaspora does not begin with slavery and colonization. But let's just talk about this for a moment. Now, for hundreds of years, my ancestors were hunted in Africa like animals. And these are husbands and wives and sons and daughters, all aspects of society, and taken away against their will, marched to the coast of Africa, particularly West Africa. And I'm told that the majority of the Africans who died as a result of enslavement died in Africa from the time they were captured and traumatized and marched to the coast, and then put in these dungeons like Elmina and Goree Island and so many others, Badagry, and kept in the most brutal conditions imaginable. You can imagine what happened to the Black women who were captured, men, women, and children separated. On Goree Island, you even had a dungeon for children. You can go there and see it. It's called the Infant's Dungeon, branded with hot irons like animals and taken out of what we now call the door of no return, put on floating coffins called slave ships, one of which is the good ship Jesus and John the Baptist. And there was another ship called Serve Jesus Daily. And you had ships called Fraternity and Liberty and Equality, and taken across the Atlantic. Now, and we survived that. So I'm a survivor of, for me, the greatest crime humanity has ever witnessed. But you have other sisters and brothers in other parts of the world who did not have that experience. Africa is the mother continent. And we, in a sense, are all African. And some of those Africans began to leave the motherland probably 100,000 years ago. And the first place that they went to was Asia. And this is where I wanted to take you on our journey, to be able to see Black people in all parts of Asia. There are Africans today, historically, not just recently now. I don't mean domestic servants who work in the Gulf countries. I mean African people who are the first people to occupy these areas in the Arabian Peninsula, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Syria, and also African people played parts in the early classical civilizations of these areas. I wanted to show you an image. Our sister yesterday, the keynote speaker, was talking about our image of Jesus. I wanted to show you an ancient image of Jesus the Christ, as black as can be, with a big afro, what I call good hair and fair skin, right? So you have African people from the very earliest phases in West Asian history. You have African people in ancient Iraq, African people in ancient Iran. And then you have this huge black population in India. Now, there are many groups of, or multiple groups of African people in India. There are Africans who are there today who have come quite recently as students or diplomats or looking for a better life. And then you have the group called the CDs. Now, these are Africans mostly from East Africa who have ventured into India beginning about 1,000 years ago, some as enslaved people. And then you have African people before that who formed the first classical civilization in India and Pakistan. It's called the Indus Valley Civilization. And then even before that, you have black people who are the first people in India, okay? So India, even now, has a black population larger than Nigeria. Now, we could continue our journey into Southeast Asia, where you have black people who played an important role in the civilizations in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Thailand, but also very, very ancient black populations in places like the Philippines, in the Andaman Islands, and Thailand and Malaysia. These are the first people in that part of the world, not the first black people, but the first people. Black people are the parent people of humanity, and everybody else is our offspring. You have a tradition of African people in the classical civilizations of early China. There's a Chinese proverb that goes, that deals with the Shang dynasty and describes them as having black and oily skin. The Shang dynasty is important to us because it is the parent civilization, the parent dynasty of China. And then if we move further east into Japan, you have the tradition that the first shogun, a military ruler of Japan, was a black man named Sakanoi Tomomoraro. There are two Japanese proverbs that have been used to suggest an African presence. One of them is, for a samurai to be brave, he must have a bit of black blood. And another reads, to make a good samurai, half the blood in one's veins must be black. Now, if we move further east, we go to Australia and the Pacific Islands. And these are areas that have always had a great interest in me. When I was very young, a university student in Southern California, I read a book called The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. I still recommend the book today. This is in the early 1970s. It's still very, very relevant because this scholar, African-American scholar, attempts to address what happened to us. How was it that the people who gave humanity to the world and the people who gave civilization to the world fell so far that most of us cannot conceive that. It's almost unimaginable to think that African people were at one time the only people on the planet and the forerunners of all the classical civilizations around the world. So I read this book, and this is the first time I began to understand that there were migrations out of Africa, as I pointed out at the beginning, long before enslavement. Okay. And I wanted to find out what happened to those sisters and brothers that left Africa so far black in the day. And I began to look at places like Australia. Now, in Australia, you have sisters and brothers who say they've been there for 60,000 years. They're commonly called Aborigines, a term they don't like. It's better to call them simply indigenous or Aboriginal. And I've been among these sisters and brothers several times. They are black, but what else about their phenotype can we identify with? For one thing, there was a branch of Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, or a very similar organization among Aboriginal Australians. And so there's long been a tradition of identifying with other black people. A better example, a classic example, would be the South Pacific. For example, when this program was first advertised, I don't know if we were able to materialize it, there was supposed to be a speaker talking about West Papua. and the liberation of Africans in West Papua. The first speaker this morning talked about the Western Sahara, and he mentioned how it was so little reported around the world. So few people know about Western Sahara, formerly Spanish Sahara. But you have a similar struggle going on in the South Pacific in the western part of the island of New Guinea, and it's called West Papua. And these are Black people who've been there at least 30,000 years, and it's being occupied by Indonesia. On the other half of the island, you have Papua New Guinea, and then you have all of what is called Melanesia, the South Pacific Islands. Melanesia means the Black Islands, and it includes Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, Fiji, New Caledonia. And in Fiji in particular, these sisters and brothers say they come from Africa. They can be very specific about it. And so as we began to move into these other areas, it calls into question, what is an African? Who is an African? Are all Black people Africans? Are all Africans Black people? These seem like basic issues that have never really been clarified. So my mission is to try to unite the entire Black world, to say that we have a common history, that we have a great history, and that we need each other, and that Africa is the base. So I wanted to show the photographs. Perhaps you'll be able to invite me back. I apologize for my ineptitude. This is very, very new to me. I thought we had it together, but I hope that we can at least be able to see the value in what I've had to say and to use it as my introduction to you and a wider group of African people.
Absolutely, Professor. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And apologies to you and to the family that we couldn't see those wonderful pictures. We had tested them out. We could see them fine, but clearly they don't want to be shown today. We absolutely must have you back to show the family what you are talking about. There's a comment here that I wanted to share with you and see what your thoughts are. It should be coming up on your screen now.
Yeah. Well, I'll just read the question. Please remember that Africans explored and inhabited the Americas before the Atlantic slave trade, referred to the Olmec heads and the amazing work of Dr. Ivan Van Sertima with his pivotal work. Ivan is my greatest teacher. I worked with Ivan. I was his foremost student for 25 years. Of course, for those who don't know, Ivan Van Sertima was the author of the book that came before Columbus, the African Presence in Early America, in Ancient America. In fact, that was a part of the presentation that I was going to give. I was going to show the Olmec heads. There's a civilization in the Americas called the Olmec civilization. And it is important to us because the Olmec civilization is the parent civilization of the Americas. Before the Inca, before the Aztec, before the Maya, before the Toltec, before the Zapotec, before the Teutonic, there was the Olmec. And at the hierarchy of the Olmec civilization was an elite group of Africans. And what stands out most about them are these colossal Africoid-looking heads. One of them weighs 100,000 pounds. And so this, as my brother points out, Professor King, Aku A. King, points out that the history of African people in the Americas does not start with slavery. And you can see African people in classical American civilizations. In fact, one scholar, a man named Alexander von Woutenau, he says, he said, everybody came to America before Columbus. But of all the people who came, it was the African who had the most decisive influence. And the African who first came to the Americas did not come as slave, but as master. But even before that, we can see evidence based on skeletal remains and DNA that people of African heritage were the first people to set foot on the shores of the Americas. So that's an excellent question, and I hope that I was able to address it.
Thank you. Sorry, bear with me.
Let me just salute you all. You keep saying bear with me, and you're having technical problems. We understand that. But what I appreciate is the effort that you're putting into it. I'm a historian, but you are making history. And I'm very proud to be a part of that. And so I'm proud of you all. And if there's anything that I can do to help in any way, just call on me anytime.
Thank you very much. What can you tell us, Professor, just completely just out there about the pyramids that are actually exist around the world as opposed to just in Egypt?
Well, I'm a little cautious about that. For example, you have in Mexico more pyramids than are in Egypt itself. But you have to ask yourself the question, what is a pyramid? In Egypt and Sudan, these are monumental structures with a certain kind of shape that were used, among other things, as tombs for the kings and queens, and in Sudan, for some of the nobility. What we see in Mexico mostly are buildings with a similar pyramidal shape, but that were used largely for religious rituals. And so I think that one of the things that we have to do is be about defining the primary terms that we are trying to address. So I would question that. I would proceed with caution when we talk about pyramids on a global scale. Let me say something else too, since I'm on a roll now and talking about definition.
Absolutely.
I think that we have to define everything from an African perspective. One of the questions that came up when the sister based in Canada was talking about mental health, one of the questions that came up was, somebody said, can we begin to address this with African terminology? And I think that we have to do that a lot. For example, in the United States, we use an expression that I hate, a couple of expressions. One is fair skin, and the other expression is good hair. Now, when African Americans say good hair, they're talking about long, straight, European-like hair, okay? When we talk about fair skin, we're talking about very, very light skin. Now, the word fair means good. And so what does that say about ourselves? In other words, a Syrian brother in the Western Hemisphere, a brother named Wade Nobles, likes to say that the essence of power is to define things based on your own definition. And what happens a lot of times is that other people define the most basic things for us. They set the standard, and we spend the rest of our lives responding to that without providing a definition of our own. What is our standard of beauty? What is fair skin to me? What is good hair to me? And when African people begin to define for themselves unapologetically, I think that we're really on the road to liberation, because the biggest form of liberation begins in the mind. Free the mind, and the rest will follow.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I love what you're sharing in terms of we are everywhere, which must be right, because being the first people on the earth, it is right that somehow everything derives from us, regardless of what it now looks like. But things have become very whitewashed, literally in some places. And so, in terms of us really acknowledging our global presence, even, how do you think that is going to help us fast track, this vision of unifying as a people, as much as shoring up the motherland to really help us to thrive?
I think that we can use the example of the Jewish diaspora. You have Jewish people, that's where the word diaspora comes from, as a matter of fact, from the Jewish experience. So you have Jewish people all over the world, but they identify with Israel. I'm saying that if African Americans had that same degree of identification with Africa, had that same sense of loyalty to Africa, we would change things overnight. Because African Americans have more wealth than I think any other group of Africans. We have more freedom of movement than most Africans. What we lack is an African consciousness. Now, my heart belongs to Africa. America is where I live, but Africa is where I belong. And I will fight to the end for Mother Africa. And what we want to do is encourage more sisters and brothers in the Americas to begin to feel the same way, and spend more time talking about where we got picked up from rather than where we got dropped off. One of the brothers who taught me used to say that just because a cat has babies in an oven You don't call the babies biscuits. We are African people. And so what we need, see, we need something too. We need a dose of love from Africa. We grow up all of our lives hearing those Africans don't like you. They don't think you're African. They don't identify with, and it hurts. It's like someone saying it's like your mother saying you are not my child. So we can do wonders if we embrace each other. But as long as we have these petty, I'm going to say nationalities, and we're talking about my tribe and where I was born, we're not going anywhere. My great hero, I have a lot of them. One is Kwame Nkrumah, but even before Nkrumah is the great Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who would say, one God, one aim, one destiny. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. And that's the kind of philosophy that I try to interject, that I might be born in Los Angeles, California, but I'm an African living in Los Angeles, California. And I think that that's the kind of message that I try to put, but we need the sisters and brothers in Africa to reciprocate with that. We love Africa. I love Africa, but we want Africa to love us back.
That's a whole topic in itself.
I know it.
In terms of, yeah. So we do exist around the world, but almost, the difference, if you like, between, our Africans on the continent and us in the diaspora, and how we can actually come together, because there are prejudices and biases that have built up over time that mean that, what I see is that
who benefits from those prejudices and biases?
Well, not us, clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to look at it. And then we know that there are contradictions in Africa itself, that Africa is not monolithic. One of the things that hurt so much was a few months ago or a year or so ago when you had in South Africa, sisters and brothers there attacking businesses belonging to Nigerians and Ethiopians. So we have a lot of contradictions, but we have to realize that a lot of those contradictions have been imposed on us. And that is what I meant by defining for ourselves. We define our own sense of identity. We don't have to have the descendants of the slave masters and colonizers tell us who we are and what we are and develop our program for us. That's one thing that we must do for ourselves and by ourselves. Another question two questions that I've not seen come up in the conference so far, and I don't want to impose, but I'm going to ask a question now. Or maybe I missed it. I haven't heard anybody talking about the pandemic. That's one. And number two, the question is, what role do non-Africans play in African liberation? I was rather astonished at the first performer. Now, I don't hate anybody, but I was surprised that it wasn't an African artist who was doing that. And so what is an African? Who are African people? What are the contradictions within Africa? And what role do non-Africans, if anybody can be said to be a non-African, play in Pan-Africanism and African liberation struggles? So perhaps what we are doing right now more than anything is a matter of defining and laying a roadmap and a parameter. How will China play in the future of Africa? You had the gentleman this morning from Western Sahara. What role do Arabs play in African liberation? See, these are thorny questions that a lot of people want to sweep under the rug, because African people are the parent people of humanity. We are prepared to embrace anybody because we know that everybody is our children. But we also tend to love a world that doesn't always love us back. And I will not mince words or apologize for making these comments. I'm too old for that.
No, absolutely. We need to tell it like it is. I think that there is a lot of it's actually not it's not black or white. That's the whole thing. Because we gave birth to the whole of humanity. It's like, actually, where do you draw the line? Because the Arabs, they would originally have looked like me, if not much darker. And so where do we talk about the original Arabs, or the ones that we consider to be the Arabs today? It's like, where do we draw the line? Those are now guess largely in South Africa, who have been there and have grown up there, do we still consider them African?
I don't.
So, sorry?
I do not.
Okay.
See, so this might be the last time you have me on, you see, because my views may be a little different than other people. I want to look, I don't hate anybody, but I think that there are some things that Black people have to do for themselves and by themselves. And that's just the way it is. We have to prove worthy of liberating ourselves. And I think that colonialism and enslavement kind of beats some of that out of us in the sense that we have to be dependent on other people to save us. I think more than any other group of people in the world that I've studied, and I've studied a lot, African people have a Messiah complex. We are waiting for somebody to do for us, to save us. And ultimately, we have to look within. I think that's the key, is to begin to look within in terms of who we are and to embrace each other. As a Black man, I want to be with a Black woman. I want to patronize with other Black people. I want to have a standard of beauty based on Africa, not based on Europe. And I will not allow other people to define my reality for me and make me feel weak or apologetic because I don't accept that position. And I think that we do that too much as a people. We love a world that doesn't love us back. And we are quick to say there's no such thing as race, color doesn't matter. And yet we are the victims of racism every day. So we need to be real.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
I agree. So I was saying that I personally would definitely invite you back, because we can't. You talked about mindset. We talked about mindset. You forward if we're not willing to see reality, and there are things that do guide us, regardless of where they came from. So, like you say, the questions that you ask, religion is another one that you could speak about it for a whole day. I just invited Dr. Unati back because you asked about the pandemic. And so it's something that she could share about that question. But there are a lot of questions that we need to answer for ourselves. Yes. As you say, there are things that we need to define for ourselves. And I don't know who said it, but I love the concept of the phrase that slavery is not or was not the beginning of our history, but it interrupted our history. It's like, everything that happened before that, we don't get to hear unless you go searching for it. It's not the thing that is out there being spoken about as much as everything else. But I guess that's on us to go looking for it as well.
All right. Well, that was Muta Baruka. And Muta, who's a brother from Jamaica, who I know personally, says slavery is not African history. Slavery interrupted African history. But I think that I've talked long beyond the time that was allotted to me, and I don't want to be rude and selfish. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. I'm proud of you. We have a lot of work to do, but we are capable of doing great things. And so thank you for having me, and much success with the rest of the program. Good luck to the other speakers, and I'm here when you need me.
Thank you so much, Professor Rashidi.
Thank you, sister.
Wonderful. Apologies again for the last time about the tech, but next time we'll get it set, because I definitely want to see the pictures. And I'm sure the family piqued our interest now with the pictures. So thank you very much. And we'll definitely have you on again another time. Peace.